Okay, and we're recording. This is another episode of Things That First Year Writers Need to Hear. As always, I'm Thane Riopel, which I don't think I've actually introduced myself frequently at the start, so people may not know how to pronounce my name, but that's how you pronounce it. And I'm here today with Weldon Bradshaw, who is was my seventh grade English teacher. Also, my father's seventh grade English teacher, I believe. And I think the best way to introduce you is to quickly recap what I was saying a little bit before we started recording, which is that there's a list of a few different professors or teachers that I've had over the years that have inspired either my outlook on education or my pedagogy in some way, and you're on the list. And it's difficult to express why, and that's part of the reason that I want to talk to you, to see if I can figure out a better way of expressing why. But the best expression I have at the moment might be something like this: that what you taught us, which perhaps took me several years of reflection to appreciate, was to find the meaning in doing the hard, gritty work that that you have to do when you write, but the kind of work that doesn't feel like the sort of Dead Poet Society effusive, explosive joy that's supposed to be the meaning in writing and literature, and the grandeur of poetry or whatever. But I mean, we read things like Line Engine versus the Ants. We read Old Man and the Sea. We read If by Rudyard Kipling. And we also did sentence diagramming, and we did spelling tests, and I remember you took us on a quote unquote field trip into the hall to point out a grammar mistake that you'd noticed on a poster that someone had put up on the bulletin board. And I remember you saying, this is the curse of being an English teacher, is you notice this kind of thing when you're walking by in the hall. So it was a meaning in writing and in literature that didn't disparage grammar, that didn't disparage the hard work, that didn't disparage the slog, maybe. I don't know, but it's like there's meaning in trudging through the mud or something like that. I'm probably doing it all sorts of injustice, but that's part of why I want to talk. And the reason that I want to talk for the podcast is because I think it seems to me there are lots and lots and lots of students, especially at the college level, for whom writing just is another thing to do. I mean, their view on writing is that it's something their professors have asked them to do. And they're kind of sick of being asked to do it. And I really wanted a chance to talk with someone for whom writing and literature seemed to have meant a considerable amount, and to maybe express some of that over the course of an hour's talk, so that and any one student who may be listening to this who might not have found a lot of meaning or found a lot of real point besides getting a grade in their essay writing work, someone like that might, I don't know if it's going to change their worldview altogether, but it might give them another perspective on it. So that's kind of the long-winded intro and why I was hoping to have you on here to talk. And I've got a few specific questions, but I kind of like to open with this one in general, with everyone. And it's, hypothetically speaking, if you had an hour to talk to first-year writing students in college, what might you say to them? What do you think they need to hear? Or maybe for you, it's seventh grade students. I don't know. But what would you want students to hear about writing and literature?
Good question. Good place to start. When I was the age of the kids that I taught for 45 years, I hated writing. I thought only sissies enjoyed writing. And I fought the system big time. And it was really about my junior year in high school that I had a teacher who was actually not an English teacher, who saw some value in what I was doing and said, basically you can do this. All I want to do is be an athlete, and I was not very good at that either. So trying to plug along through life and figure out what I wanted to do and what I was good with. But anyway, this particular teacher, kind of got me channeled in the right direction. And I think part of it was where I went to school, it was all guys at the time. And when you wrote something for class, you had to get up and read it. And when you're a very self-conscious 12 or 13-year-old kid who doesn't think he's very good at this, doesn't like it, and you have to get up and read, and there are a bunch of beady eyes staring at you, that's pretty intimidating. And at that point, I had no idea I was going to be an English teacher. But as time went on, this particular teacher I had as a junior history teacher basically said, and he had been in the Navy, and he said it in words a little bit rougher than what I'm going to say: don't worry about what others think about what you're writing. If you have something to say, if it's coming from your heart, get it down on paper and say it, and don't be ashamed of it. And it's like the light bulb went on, and it's like, hey, I can say what I want to say, and I can take care of the grammar and all that later. But anyway, as time went on, I decided that, and got into teaching. No kid, unless he really wanted to, was going to stand up and read in front of class, because I think writing can be very personal. And it's pretty ironic, I guess, that I have spent a career as a freelancer for the newspaper and writing a website column for Collegiate, that everything I write, whether I say it out loud or not, is out there for the public to see and judge. And it's something I hated doing when I was the age of the kids I teach, or taught along the way. It's been maybe 4 years since I was in the classroom. Writing is hard, and even if there was a shortcut, I would have figured it out by now. I just haven't done that. But the first step of writing, I think, is just to plan what you're going to say. I had a journalism professor in college who said, if you have 30 minutes to write a story before deadline, spend 10 minutes planning what you're going to write, and then 20 minutes writing. And I've kind of tried to encourage that. Students don't have the tight deadlines that a newspaper person might have, but they do have deadlines nonetheless. But just plan, know what you're going to say. And I was never one in teaching where I wanted to have a real organized outline, necessarily Roman numeral 1A, B, all that stuff. But it's more just have a list, whether it's on the back of an envelope or, wherever, about what you wanted to say. I'm not sure every English teacher goes at it that way. Thing number 2 was just to write, get the words down. Don't spend time revising and writing at the same time, although I've done that plenty of times. But just get the words on the page. I found I really enjoyed the movie Finding Forrester, the Sean Connery being Forrester, and excuse me, and he was mentoring a young kid from an underserved community who was pretty intelligent, and he said something to the effect, and again, a little bit rougher than this: write the first draft with your heart and then revise with your head. And just get the words down on the page. Thing number 3 that I always tried to tell kids was reflect. And they'd look at me like, but aren't you supposed to, everybody else has said proofread and edit. I'm saying, no, reflect. So plan, write, reflect. And well, what does that mean? And I say, well, if you have time, get up, walk outside, take a walk, go, do something else for a while, think about what you've written, then come back and do the proofreading and editing. I've told kids so many times, I'm pretty convinced people proofread pretty well, but I'm not convinced they edit. I see them as different things. And, it doesn't mean what you write has to be perfect. If somebody writes something that's perfect, I would really, really like to see that. I don't know that it can be done. So it's one of these things about strive for excellence. Don't worry about perfection. That's what's perfect in writing anyway. But anyway, you take the time. That's really the kind of the blue collar work, the grunt work of writing. Is the proofreading and editing part to me. Is it doesn't mean you have to mull over every single word and spend hours on every single word, but take the time to make it as good as it can be. And so it's plan, write it, reflect about what you've written, proofread and edit it. And then the early days of my teaching, step 5, the final draft was, then you copy it over neatly. Now step 5 is you push the button
Right.
and it's done. So that part of it's a little bit easier, but it can be a painstaking task. I find as somebody who's written a lot of stuff over the years, I mean, literally thousands of articles, essays, and such. Sometimes they come pretty easily, and sometimes I'm just grinding. It's like going uphill into the wind through deep mud and wondering if you're ever going to get there, but eventually you get there. So
That's
that's the short version of something I could probably talk about all day, but that's, if anybody's still awake after listening to that, maybe we go on to whatever comes next.
that's so you already answered in there one of my other questions, which was kind of what did I write down? When did literature and writing become part of what you wanted to do in life? And that's kind of what you were mentioning with you had your teacher. You said junior year, was it?
Yeah, it's junior year, and actually, I don't think the reading and the literature part affected me quite at that point. I
Mm,
mean, it's kind of the light bulb went on, and I can write stuff. It didn't mean it was easy. It was just I kind of broke through that barrier of worrying about what anybody else thought about what I wrote. I can remember at high school I went to, the on Friday, they give you a topic to write about over the weekend. And very often it was some concept like freedom or friendship or something like that.
kind of SAT writing, kind of.
And you have to write from your heart. And in the kind of the macho place, or the way I felt it was, writing from your heart was not something guys did very, if they could, they didn't want anybody to know it.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of break through that area of, I don't, I don't care what anybody thinks. If this is what I feel and I can back it up, then it's okay. Uh, and I think that was a real barrier for me to break through. But I think I wanted to be a sports writer. I majored in journalism. That's all I wanted to do, and had a chance through, without going into all the details, to teach and coach. But I looked at it as I wanted to be really a coach who taught rather than a teacher who coached.
Yeah.
And I had a mentor at collegiate where you went, and where I taught you, your brother, and your dad, uh, who in the early days, who basically told me that if I wanted to work there, I was going to be a teacher first and a coach second, but you could do both with enthusiasm and so forth. It kind of turned me on to the value of, it's, you can take as much pride as what you do as a teacher. I may have been on the meathead side in my early days, maybe in my later, I don't know. But anyway, that's when I think I, as a teacher more than as a student, saw the beauty of literature and how you could, make that work for 13-year-old guys. I worked with seventh graders because that's where the job was when I got the job in the first place, and it just took. And I enjoyed the age and the enthusiasm that many of them showed, and the opportunity to maybe help them see some things in themselves that they didn't see. I didn't want them to wait till their junior year for the light to go on.
Yeah. And so that kind of brings me to my next question, which is something like, what do you want your students to take with them when they leave your class? And I mean, from collegiate, almost everyone in there is going to college.
Yeah.
For listeners, it's a prep school. It's without going without trying to sound braggadocious or anything. It's a very good school, and kids from there tend to go to college. So, with that said, is there anything that you're expecting or hoping that your students are gonna like? What is that light that could go on? In other words.
Yeah. I, another good question. began every year by asking kids, how many of you like to write? And occasionally a hand would go up. Again, this is 12-year-old guys who are going to be 13 before the year's over, and they're just coming off of summer, and probably school is not where they would like to be at this point. Well, a couple of hands will go up, and then I'll say, well, how many of you kind of like to write? And a few more go up, and then how many of you just don't like doing it, period? And a few hands go up, and I say, well, you got to get over that and tell them we're going to do a lot of this. But one of my favorite stories is a guy, he's a freshman in college now, and so that would have been, 5 or 6, 7 years ago. And another guy had also taught his dad, and this guy's a really good athlete. And when we started the class, he was one that was pretty resistant to writing. And he just found it, let's get it done, check it off the list. Let's just do what I need to do to get a C or a C plus or a B minus or something, just to satisfy my parents, all this stuff. But I'd rather be doing my athletic stuff. Well, this was a really good class, and they got turned on to some of these things: the lineage inversions, the ants, the old man, the see if, a lot of the different things that we did, and a lot of things we added that since you would have been in the class. But the last day of the year, we were having our exam that day, and it was not in our regular room. It was in another building. And I came down the hall there, headed there, and he said, yeah, how you doing? I'm getting my eye black on. He'd really gotten turned on. The point he was trying to make was that he was getting fired up for this game.
Oh, he was putting on the sports eyeliner for
that's what he didn't literally do it, but he kind of made the motion like that. And I knew what he meant was, I'm really getting fired up for this, because one of the things I tried to tell him was, you taking an exam in a class is like the big game you're going to play, and you do your preparation for it. And if you've done it well, nothing will catch you by surprise. But the secret is in the preparation. And this is a guy who, I've had to convince, he was a tough sell early on the last day of the year. It's like, I'm so fired up to do this. Now, it may have been fired up that he wouldn't have to do it the next day, but I really think it was more, he'd gone from not seeing any beauty in this or taking any joy in it to finding that it's something he liked to do. I wanted him, so that's a long answer to a question that can be answered by saying, I just want him to find joy in it and beauty in it, and in writing, and find writing to be an exciting thing rather than a painful thing.
I think I've been fortunate to have at least one or two similar things. Like at UVA, I had once, I taught so at UVA, you got to, when I was doing my master's degree there, and you could apply to teach, and when you were allowed to teach, then you could actually write out your own syllabus. And I decided to do mine about rhetoric, which is probably just the most fascinating subject under the sun for like most of the people who's in the room, right? Yeah. And I just opened the first day. I opened on the first day, and I said, "So, how many of you? I mean, and be honest with me here. How many of you are kind of disappointed to learn that this class is about rhetoric, because they only see that it's the intro writing class when they sign up for it, and they just do it according to like what time they have available in the schedule." And one or two hands go up, and I say, yeah, fair enough. It's certainly not the most exciting subject that I expect you were thinking of, but so I'm going to spend today and give you a bit of pitch on what the course is going to look like and what you can expect from me, on almost like the philosophy of the course, almost, so that if you want to get off the train now, you can. And if you want to, then you should, because when you're in college, you should be taking the courses that you think are going to be good for you. But it's actually in that acknowledgement. I'm really honing in on the question you say you ask your students, which is, how many of you like writing? And then you address it head on. And it seems to me that in addressing it head on, by pointing out the obvious fact that, yeah, it's not always fun at first or later sometimes. Like you were saying, sometimes you're walking uphill through mud. But by addressing that, you can actually get to the point where you can enjoy it or find meaning in it. You don't ignore that, I think. And I don't know that there's really a question in that exactly, but I don't know.
Yeah, I've, as you well know, have been coaching for a very long time, and I look at writing as a competition with myself to be as good as I can be. And a lot of the kids that I have taught along the way are athletes, whether they're star athletes or whether they're members of the team. But there is some level of competitive spirit, and in a prep school, you're competing for whatever you're competing for to be excellent in whatever way you can. And I just look at this as try to sell the idea that it is a competition, but you're not competing with somebody else. Who's the best writer you've ever read? Well, that's your opinion. It's not, there's no standard for that. Is Hemingway better than Faulkner? Who knows?
Yes,
but
but go on.
but it's you what I look at writing myself is this is my way to compete with myself to see, if I'm, if the ideas aren't there, how can I somehow summon what I need to do to get them on the page? How do you tell athletes you got to dig deeper. Well, I've had some times when the ideas haven't been there. I'm tired. I'm not interested, but I know I got a deadline. I know I have something that needs to be written. How do you dig deeper when I'm working for the newspaper? Generally I have 450 to 500 words to write on a game story, and it's not reporting the game. It's more writing about the game, finding the angle, making the reader feel like he's there. So it's not just a recitation of the facts. And sometimes the ideas just aren't there. Well, how do I get them? Well, that's where you just have to think more deeply and, train your mind to, even with noise around you, if you're writing in a place that's not quiet, how do you focus on the task at hand? And, that's something, I just find it's part of the competition of being as good as you can be. I'm sure everything I've written, there's something that's the best that I have ever done, but there's also something at the far other end of the spectrum. I don't have any idea what it is. It's just trying to do each one the best I can. And that's a message I try to convey to kids. And, what I try to tell them as a teacher of them, even though we're not at the same level of experience by any means, is I'm not asking you to do something in your preparation for assignment that I do differently. This is what works for me. I'm not judging you as I would judge myself or a professional writer. I'm judging you as I would judge a seventh grader.
Right. That's what you are.
But the process is there. Whether I'm writing a book, which I've done, or whether you're writing a paper before the end of English class ends, you still got to do your planning. You still got to do your writing. You still got to do your reflecting on what you've written, your proofreading, your editing, and all that. You got to go through the steps of it. So, I'm just going to judge my students on where they should be developmentally, not where I would expect a professional to be.
Right.
Any more than I judge myself on, can I write like Hemingway? Well, the answer to that's no. But anyway,
I think you need to be a few bottles in before you start writing like that anyway, but
yeah.
no. So that's very interesting. So here's a question. We've talked, or I suppose you've talked, in the way you've been discussing writing has been very much as a parallel with sports, and for what it's worth, you coached cross country and track, I believe.
And
it was track as well.
I've coached a lot of things. That's primarily what I've coached.
Right. I think it's worth noting the cross country, at least, because when we're talking about like charging uphill through the mud and the wind. That's only partially a metaphor. But I guess where I'm going with this is there a particular, we've talked about the ways that, the writing and the development of athletic ability are similar. Is there something particular about one or the other that maybe sets it apart? And I'm not even trying to place them in any sort of hierarchy. I'm just asking, is the reason that you're interested in excellence in writing that you just want excellence in whatever endeavors
Yeah.
it is, or?
Yeah. Yeah. And the athletic context is what works for me. Not everybody is involved in athletics as much as I have been over the years, but I've written a piece already for our website about our theatrical program and how they're making adjustments in performing plays, and I got another one in the works. And actors don't just go up there and start acting. There's a lot of preparation that goes with it, and you see the final result in public. You don't see all the goofs and all the mistakes they make. You see the final production, just as when we write, you see the final. You don't see all the crud that goes along as you grind your way through it. So I think that whether it's an athletic context, if you're a musician and you're performing somewhere, you don't just sit up on the stage with your guitar or sit on the piano bench and put your fingers on the keys and it happens. There's a lot of preparation that goes along with it. So I think we're kind of in a fast food world now. I mean, we're very much in a fast food world, and a lot of the writing people do is with their thumbs, actually, on a device. And it's been a long time since I've had a abbreviation on a writing assignment that was from a text message, that kind of abbreviation, LOL or one of those types of things. But that didn't, that may work on something that you're doing quickly and fast, but it's, there's still a place in the world, I believe, to take your time and create something of some beauty and of excellence rather than just crank it out and let it fly. I don't know whether that makes sense at all.
It makes a lot of sense. I think and I think it's exactly the kind of, I mean, if we're talking about, first year college students who are looking to get through their mandatory intro writing course, as quick as they can, and it's not like there isn't reason to do that. I mean, if you're not primarily interested in writing, maybe it's more a scientific endeavor you're after, then, it makes more sense to dedicate more time to those sorts of things. So it's not like there's no reason that students wouldn't want to get through things, but it also doesn't mean that there's no, I'm trying to phrase it in a parallel manner, but it's collapsing in my head as I'm forming the words. The point I'm trying to make is that there might also be a reason to write the best first year essay that you can. It's not going to solve world hunger. It's probably going to sit in your computer files forever, unless you may even just delete it. But maybe doing the thing in front of you, whatever it may be, as well as you can, is worth something, if only to make you a better thing maker.
But take pride in what you do, and take pride in giving the task your best effort, whatever it is. And that's basically it in a nutshell, rather than just do it to get it done and check it off the list.
Yeah.
It's probably easier for me because most of my focus professionally now is on writing things that appear on a website. And, when the schools open up and start playing games and I can get out and they need the help that a freelancer can provide, I hope I'll be back at that. But, when I was coaching 3 seasons and, working 14-hour days and all that, the time that I could take with the column I write was, first I wasn't writing as many of them because I just didn't have the time. But now it's fun to be able to focus on that. I think something that, I heard back probably in high school, I certainly did studying journalism in college, is if you want to write, or, or have to write, want to write, you got to read and read a lot of things. And, I find I read a lot from the newspaper columnists, whether I agree with them or not, just to see how they write. Uh, just as a guy that's our football coach will watch games on TV or go out to games to scout, to see what other people are doing. So maybe there's a secret that they can pick up there. So, I'd love to be able to read as much as I would like to read. Time is an issue there, but I don't know how good a writer you can be if you don't take the time to read. And what you're actually doing is studying other writers and not so much emulating their style, but forming your own style.
Yeah, it's funny. I find that after I read something with a distinctive style, even if it's something like I was listening to an audiobook of The Fellowship of the Ring as I was driving to and from Indiana. I'm in North Carolina right now, so it was a long drive, but I need something to listen to. And I find that if I listen or read something with a distinctive style, then if I sit down to write immediately afterward, I almost integrate that style a little bit into what I'm doing. So it, I almost think of it as you don't have to make like extensive notes on how someone writes when you're reading them. It's almost you almost pick it up by osmosis. It's almost difficult not to.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes if you get too technical about it, you're missing the point. I think I pick up a lot of words, and I think as a writer, you write words that a reader can understand, not words. And there are plenty of folks out there and columnists that I read that, use big $5 words to show how smart they are. And you don't need to do that. But, for me coming through school, learning vocabulary was you get a list of words, you memorize the words, the definitions, and then you have a quiz on it or a test on it. And I can remember somewhere in my early newspaper days writing myself into the word beneficent. And I didn't even know the word, but I put it together from having had a little bit of Latin in the context. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so cool. I just came up with a word that I never used. And, again, that was in my early days. I don't look at any of this as being cool anymore. But when you are writing and you kind of write yourself into something that you didn't expect, I find that's enjoyable. That's exciting. I doubt that I would have when I was the age of the students I taught or that you're teaching, but it's just, again, finding joy in the experience.
Well, it's interesting because the discovery process, and anyone who's listened to any of the other episodes of this will have heard some of this spiel before, so I'll make it short. But I mean, knowing when students that I've taught come to understand that writing is more about, or at least when you start writing, it's more about exploring a subject than it is about reporting what you already know. When they come to think like that, that's a game changer. And it's a game changer that they're excited to have encountered. I mean, one of the things I have this very vivid memory from the first day of a class at UVA. And I was saying to students something like, so how many of you, when you've written an essay, have come across a new idea that you didn't expect? And like everyone's hand goes up because of course they do. And then I say, okay, how many of you like tried to kind of sweep that under the rug? Or how many of you, tried to incorporate it? And like maybe like 2, maybe 3 hands go up for incorporate it, but most of them go up for like, I tried to sweep it under the rug. And then what I tell them is, okay, what if I told you that when you come across a new idea in your writing, that that is not a sign of failure, but rather a sign that your writing process is doing exactly what it is supposed to do? That's the point. And I have this, like I was saying, a vivid memory of this one girl who truly went like this when as I was saying, went like bug-eyed, just to hear. She'd never heard it. It was at once something that she had never heard, and yet also something that she'd always heard. It was something that was ready to click in her mind. Like all the pieces were there, and you just had to move one just a smidge, and the rest of it kind of clicked into place. And it is a game changer. And then you have students who are actually enjoying writing, or at least not hating it all of the time, which I think is probably a pretty good goal. But
yeah, it's just, I tried to sell the idea that don't look at it as work, look at it as a challenge, but something fun to do. Now, I mean, to say that and to actually do it are two different things. And when you're a student and you're taking 5 or 6 different classes, and one of them's asking you to write a lot of stuff, I can see where that would get. I mean, obviously, it gets challenging. It did for me coming along through school, but it did for me professionally until I started kind of to scale down my professional responsibilities as I got toward the end of my career. But it's, again, it's just trying to find the joy in it and take pride in doing the job the best you can, whether you're digging ditches or writing the world's greatest novel.
Yeah. So I want to make a very natural segue that's definitely not wedged in out of nowhere into the topic of literature, which is something we've kind of touched on a little bit, I think, as we've been talking, but never quite hit on exactly. And if I'm recalling what you said a few minutes ago correctly, it wasn't really until you'd started teaching that you started to look at literature as, I don't want to say as meaningful, because I'm fairly certain that would shortchange your earlier experience with it. But you know what I mean?
You could be pretty accurate with that.
Oh, well, fair enough then. But what maybe the best way to ask this question is why why in the name of all things holy would you make 7th graders read The Old Man and the Sea? I'm teasing you, obviously, but there's a certain
there's a reason.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna answer longer than you asked. Leiningen versus the ants you referenced, that is a really exciting story that pretty much any kid that I taught along the way is going to remember that. They may not remember every day, but they're going to remember that. I do that right before Christmas vacation because that's when people are signing off, and I want to have something to get their attention. In running, we talk about run through the finish. Don't just run to the finish. Okay. And I figure, I'm not doing a good job teaching if I sign off before, the end of the term or the vacation. If I kind of sign out a few days early and we just coast to the end. So I'm going to give it the best shot I can so that they go into the vacation one with some momentum thinking, hey, this is pretty cool, but also the idea that you don't stop before the end. Okay. The Old Man and the Sea comes almost at the end of the year. I do a couple of things after that I think are some poems, some songs that I have, come up with that I use as poems. We listen to them, we study them. What's the writer, the poet trying to say? If is one, which wasn't a song, but there are 2 or 3 of those. That's what ends the year. But The Old Man and the Sea, one, at that time, kids are tired. It is an easy book to read, but it is powerful as it can be. And it kind of brings together what I've been talking about do the best job you can. Victory is not so much in coming home with the prize. It's knowing that you've played the game to the end. You've left nothing. You've left everything out on the court. As Santiago didn't come back with the fish, but he came back with the satisfaction that he had given this task the effort of a lifetime. There's some other messages in there that that I try to get across to kids. One of which is, seventh grade guys can sometimes don't know whether they're fish or fowl, and
Mm.
maybe mixing metaphors there a bit. But there's one line in there where Santiago's talking about he talks to himself when he's out at sea. And that's considered not to be a cool thing to do. And he says, but if others heard me talking out loud, they'd think I'm crazy. But since I'm not crazy, I don't care. And we talk about how what Hemingway perhaps means by that is to be comfortable with who you are. Don't, it doesn't mean you ignore and you're oblivious to others' feelings, but it's be comfortable in your own skin, which I think 13-year-old guys can hear. Any of us can hear that. There's another line in there that resonates with me greatly when, and I've referred to it along, in my own life with some instances. He says, a man can be destroyed but not defeated. When the sharks destroy the marlin, says a man can be destroyed but not defeated. And we talk about, well, if you had a choice of being defeated or destroyed, defeated sounds like a lot better deal. So what does that mean? And it's talking about you get knocked down, you get up again. Your dream is destroyed. Do you quit or do you keep moving? And so it's themes like that I want to get across, because it really ties together a lot of the hidden curriculum that I've been trying to get across during the year. I think one of the beauties of teaching literature is, you can teach some lessons that come from that, rather than just have them read stories to read stories, read books to read books. So, I tried to tie a lot of life lessons into the literature, and The Old Man and the Sea just seems to do that.
Yeah, the Old Man and the Sea. I mean, I suppose it's confessional time. I couldn't stand that book when we read it. I was because I'm a seventh grader and I'm reading the thing, and it's something that I've looking back on it now. I'm like, oh, okay, this is probably one of the most meaningful works of literature that I have ever read, and I've read a lot of Shakespeare. Like I counted them up the other day. I've taken, I think, 7 different Shakespeare courses since I started college. And yet here I am trying to teach writing as opposed to Shakespeare. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But because the story, I guess spoilers a little bit, but in a nutshell, what happens in the story is that Santiago, who's the old man, goes out to sea, hooks a marlin on his line, and fights with it for days. And the better part of the book is him at sea in a boat alone, wrestling with this marlin, wrestling with the prize that he is trying to win out of the sea from his efforts. And it's not like this grand battle where like the marlin like leaps up and tries to spear him or something like that or anything. It's more like you get scenes of him just digging in his heels in the boat and holding the line, and lots of in description of just slogging uphill through the mud, so to speak. And at the end of the day, he hooks the marlin, ties it to the side of his boat, and starts going back. And as he's going back, sharks swarm and they eat the marlin. So he goes out, has this incredible battle with, the elements, with nature, with the beast of the marlin, and comes back with nothing material to show for it save the skeletal remains of the fish. And, the question is, well, was it a waste? And I suppose if you want to say that the worst thing that could happen is that you're destroyed, then maybe it is a waste. And if you want to take what I have come to think is the wiser route and say that, I'm quote using your language here, of course, which I guess is also Santiago's, if you say that the worst thing is that a man could be defeated, then it doesn't seem like it's waste at all. And I've become so lost in that, just talking about it right here, that I can't even quite remember where I started with it. But I think that was kind of the point, which is there's something incredibly meaningful in that, if you're going through your writing class and you're not picking up and you're not taking it seriously, if you're just thinking about it as busy work, you're going to miss this stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's how do you deal with adversity? How do you deal with challenges? How do you deal with disappointment? And that's one of I think as teachers of English and literature and whatever, there is a hidden curriculum. What are we really trying to get across? Are you trying to help kids get A's in class? Yeah, if they can do the work and all that, yeah. But what it is, as lofty as this sounds, what you're trying to do is help them get A's in life. If I was really sick a few years ago. I was in tough shape, and I kept thinking, the Santiago line: "A man can be destroyed but not defeated." This may kill me, but it's not going to beat me. I'm not going to go down without swinging like crazy. I came through that okay, but ultimately okay. But that was something lying in the ICU thinking about. It was like, this disease may kill me, but it's not going to beat me. Uh, it's one of the things I've told runners: if somebody beats you across the finish line, make sure it's because they're faster. You can't control that, not because they're tougher, not because they're better prepared, not because they have a better mindset. You can control that. So that's it's just kind of playing on the line about man can be destroyed, not defeated. Now we talk about that in class, but part of that final test that the kids
Mr.
take
Bradshaw,
is explaining that.
Quick moment. There seems to be some crackling coming through. I don't know if that's something that's happening or not, but
I don't know.
Is there anything audible on your end with that?
No.
Okay, you just keep talking then. You were saying
you want. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I've just unplugged the headset.
Yeah.
Talking.
Thank you. Sorry about that. But you were saying though.
No, it's it's like do the best you can with what you have, and I don't know how much got dropped there, but one of the things I've tried to tell runners along the way is to, if somebody beats you across the finish line, make sure it's because they're faster. You can't do anything about that, but not because they're tougher or mentally more prepared or physically better prepared. You can only do what you can do. And, as, I was dealing with some, pretty tough physical stuff. That's what I was saying is this may kill me, but it's not going to beat me. And that's a message I learned from that story particularly. One of the things, that I've referenced, that final test, that exam that the kids take at the end of the year. We talk enough about that line from The Old Man and the Sea and several others that I give kids a chance to write about that. I mean, they have several choices. They don't write about all of them, but they kind of pick what speaks to them and what they feel like they can articulate best. And it's not just so much repeating what I've said in class, it's taking that and how does that apply to your life. They know very well that they'll read what they've written and I'll read it and it won't go anywhere else. So they can, let it flow from their heart, which is where writing should come from anyway.
That's It's funny because all of this, on the one hand, it sounds very grandiose, and on another hand, it seems very obvious, right? It's one of those things where I would look back on everything we've said here, and it's like I don't know that there's much that we've said that hasn't been said before, that people don't know, at least in a sort of lip service way. But I mean, it's very easy, at least I've found, with the first year college students that I write. It's very easy to sit down and talk with them. And while you're talking with them, get them to really believe in the meaning of writing. Like really, like you can do that. You can, because they're not stupid, and they're not so cynical that if you express yourself clearly and genuinely that they won't pick up on that. Right? They're human beings capable of picking up on that sort of thing. But then they sit down to write and they snap right back into their old habits. And the challenge that I'm trying to work through with my teaching, and I suppose in my own writing as well, is when we talk about finding the meaning in writing, when we talk about all this sort of grandiose abstract stuff, how does that manifest? You know, what does that actually mean on a practical level? Because it's very easy to talk about in the abstract, and then when you sit down to write, to not act like that's true. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? It's a vague question, but it's the best I've got.
It would, I don't know that I have an answer that will nail it 100%.
Yeah.
I think everybody has creativity. I mean, I really do. Different levels, and of course, some people are very creative. Some, it's the way they're wired. But I think it's our responsibility as teachers to help people find that. That teacher I had as a junior in high school saw something in me I didn't see. I was in whatever creativity was there was inhibited for whatever reason, probably because I felt like everything I wrote I had to read in front of somebody else, and it would be embarrassing to me, so I didn't write what I was feeling. I find it's having to write on deadline is, I think does not do help creativity a whole lot. Sometimes it just isn't there. You're not feeling it. I always have tried as much as I could to give people enough freedom of time to write, so that one, you just sometimes can't flip on creativity like that. You got too much other stuff going on in your head. So it's, I think a lot of it's just the light goes on somewhere, and it becomes something that you're passionate about rather than just something that you got to do. I don't know that comes anywhere close to answering what you asked.
I mean, I think it does. I think it just points out that it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, and we'll start wrapping up here, I think, because I don't want to take too much more of your time. But I was talking in the last episode with one of my friends from Hamilton College about writing as a sort of truth-seeking process. And we were pointing out that, okay, talking about truth-seeking, okay, well, that sounds like about the kind of thing you'd find on the inside of a Hallmark card in the corner of a CVS, right? It's something that sounds very aphoristic. But then we were talking about her writing her archaeology thesis, and she was being very meticulous in that process with making sure she had measured these. I can't remember the word she used. Maybe it was like debitage or something. But this very small rocks they'd found, she was being very careful with how she measured them, and then she was transcribing the data into like an Excel spreadsheet. And what we were pointing out is that is the truth-seeking process. That there's actually meaning in double checking the measurement of the tiny rock, and that's one way in which that manifests. And it's like, when you're being careful, that's part of it. And when you're actually letting yourself say the thing that you want to say, regardless of whether you think in the moment that someone would like it, that's also that's meaningful. It's it's the slog, but it's meaningful, I guess. So I don't know.
It's I could never have imagined sitting in the seventh grade classroom myself that all these years later I'd be having a conversation about being passionate about, because I was just passionate about the bell ringing, ending the English class, so I wasn't going to have to be there and listen to a teacher talk about writing. I had a chance a few years ago. We had a speaker at school by the name of Frank DeFord. Frank DeFord passed away several years ago, but he was one of the, regarded as one of the great American sports writers of all time. He's written was on NPR. He wrote for Sports Illustrated. I mean, he is the creme de la creme of American sports writers. And he was there speaking, and I was supposed to get 15 minutes with him to do a quick interview and write a column about it. And it turned out something fell through, and I had him sitting in my office for an hour, just Frank. And I mean, it was like Mr. DeFord, no, call me Frank. And I'm thinking, I've seen you on TV. I've read your stuff for years. And, it's like one of the questions I asked him was, how would you teach writing? And he said, I wouldn't. You can't teach writing. You just have to write. And I thought that was a pretty simple answer from a guy who wasn't a teacher of writing. I think it's more complicated than that. But I guess that gets down to they're not shortcuts with this. You just got to, for some it comes more easily than others, but you get good at something by doing it. Maybe it's some Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours philosophy there, but you just do it, continue to work on the process until it's something that flows more than having to think about it. If that makes any sense. It's like, if you think about how to shoot a free throw, there are different steps that you take. But if you get to the free throw line and think, okay, dribble 3 times, bend my elbow, and all this stuff, probably you're going to miss it. But if you have it so well in your mind, the process, that you do it naturally, you have a lot better chance of success with that. How does somebody who's the 7th grader or a freshman in college have the life experience to do that? Well, it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. But writing is nothing more than thinking on paper or on a computer screen. And it's like, how do you want your thoughts to come out? And that's really what I've tried to always look at myself. How do I want to express what I'm trying to say? Because once your name is on it, it's you.
I got to say, I think that's a pretty beautiful spot to end.
Sounds good.
Yeah, no, this has been a lot of fun, Mr. Bradshaw. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for including me in this. I hope it's somewhat helpful to somebody out there, that one of your students that's listening to it.
We will see.
Right.
But in any event, for the listeners, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. You've just finished an episode of Things That First-Year Writers Need to Hear. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing. It'd help this reach more people. And check out another episode if you want, or maybe something a bit shorter if you'd prefer.